Okay, hi everybody, this is Curtis Collicutt. I'm just on my website here, serverascode.com. Just want to talk about a recent blog post I put up called Securing a Form on the Internet. Still pretty difficult. And so, for whatever reason, I needed to have a website that had a form on it, a contact us form. It's not this website, but it's another one. And I sort of went through the process of thinking, well, what does that look like, right? How do you actually do that? And it's still kind of complicated, still pretty difficult, depending on your perspective, right? So I kind of have this image, which I like, to be honest, of someone using their computer, presumably building a form, but they're just going to get hit by a meteorite, right? And that's kind of what like using the internet and developing on the internet is like today. So for the perspective of this blog post, I'm assuming that somebody wants like a contact us form, right? And the too long didn't read is that if you want a contact us form on your site, it's best just to pay for a form provider of some kind, right? That's the easiest thing to do. It could be a little bit expensive over time, but it's really ultimately like you need a good contact form. That's the best thing to do. On the other hand, though, if you like doing this kind of systems work and writing a bit of code, there are some great free tier services that you can use that provide a lot of the underlying functionality. We'll get into this a bit more, but I mean, the interesting part too is that you probably can't, get to zero services that you're using. What do they say? Like if you want to, build a toaster from scratch, first you have to create the universe. But you can do it, right? I think it's interesting though that we're sort of in a place where you can't just easily, super quickly create a nice form that's safe and secure, on some sort of internet basis, right? Like it's still kind of, the internet is still kind of fundamentally flawed, right? That's where we live. I've also got this other blog post where I talk about the numerous pain points of programming, kind of death by 1,000 cuts, right? Like, so lots of all the fun stuff you have to do around programming, right? That isn't actually part of programming. But okay, let's get into it. Let's think about what do we do to get a contact us form, right? So the first thing is, again, the best thing to do is just to abstract away all this by using some kind of service, right? So I talk about using Google Forms or Typeform or Tally or SurveyMonkey. There's a whole bunch of them. There's one called UForm. So it's really the best thing to do is just use that. It's going to save you a lot of time, save you a lot of headaches. And what you can do is just transfer the risk, transfer all of the requirements, the needs to that form provider, right? Then again, they're not cheap depending on your perspective, right? So like I think Tally is $24 a month. I think Typeforms is like anywhere between 25 and 100. And these are recurring monthly costs, right? So it adds up over time. If you just have one little form, contact form that you want, it can be quite expensive. In most situations, people are going to have a lot more than one form, but if you only had one, it does kind of add up, right? Especially if you are starting a business and it's not making any money yet. And overall, this is an important idea for people who are trying to build things quickly and safely. The cost of abstracted infrastructure right now is really quite low, depending on your usage level, of course. So we can pass a lot of risk, a lot of work to these providers, to these abstractions. And if you have a business that's creating like any sort of revenue, then it's pretty much going to be worth it to use some sort of form of abstraction. Sure, like it's going to add up $20 here, $40 there, $50 there, but for a couple $100 a month, you can just get a ton of services that really will save you a lot. The other thing to think about when you're doing a form is where does the data go, right? Like the point of having a form is getting the data out of it. If somebody is contacting you, you want to see that contact information. If you go and build your own form, you need to maintain that form over time. And if you don't, at some point, it's probably going to stop working, right? So what's the point of a form that doesn't work anymore, that doesn't actually send you the information that you want to get, and the people who are presumably trying to contact you for valid reasons can't contact you, right? So it's not just today that you have to think about, it's the years potentially that you have this website up and there's a form there, so you want it to work for a long time. As I mentioned too, even if you want to build your own form, you're still probably going to need some services to help with it, right? Like you still need a place to host your website. You're going to need some server-side code where the form gets submitted. You're probably going to need maybe a database or something to storage in, or at least an email provider that's going to send the email for you. You'll probably need a CAPTCHA provider, right? So you're still going to need a bunch of services. You can't do 100% of it on your own. You could certainly do a lot on your own, but at some point you're probably going to need some services. The other part too is if you do this on your own, you're probably going to have to write some code to be the handler, to be where the form gets submitted, right? So you're going to have to maintain that code. It could have bugs. You could do it wrong. Maybe if you're using a framework, you're going to get things like CSRF for free. You're going to get a form sort of tooling for free. In this post, I'm sort of taking the perspective that of not using a framework. Maybe it's just a static site with some JavaScript. Okay, so here we are. Okay, I still want to build my own form, right? Not going to use an abstracted provider. Still just going to build our own form. So what things do you have to worry about? Most of what I think about is spam, bots, denial of service, using up resources on your site, right? Like no matter what, a website costs money to run. So usually the more resources a site uses, the more it costs. Typically you're going to get some sort of free tier with a lot of people that will help you to provide, a lot of companies that will help you to provide this kind of thing, right? But you really need to look out for spam. You need to look out for bots. You need to protect against those kind of things. And using up whatever your free tier is, or if you're using more than your free tier, then you may have to pay a lot more if your resources are being abused, right? So here are some of the security requirements you're going to have to think about if you're building your own form. First is SSL, HTTPS, TLS, whatever you want to call it, right? Like you need a certificate, you need HTTPS. This is largely a solved problem, right? Because of Let's Encrypt, most service providers are able to give you free certificates. This is actually one of the more happy things that sort of happened in the internet. This has actually made things easier, things safer. Another thing that you're going to need is some kind of CAPTCHA, a completely automated public Turing test to tell computers and humans apart, right? You don't want bots submitting to your contact form. So you're going to need some kind of CAPTCHA tool, like for example, Cloudflare's Turnstile. You're probably also going to want to be able to rate limit in some fashion, right? Where you don't want, if somebody a bot does get through the CAPTCHA, you don't want them to submit 10,000 contact list forms per minute or something like that, right? Like you want to have some sort of rate limiting. This is a little bit more challenging because a lot of times what happens is rate limiting gets sort of bundled together with some abstracted services in terms of web application firewalls, which can be a premium service, right? So this can be a little bit more challenging. I do kind of personally think that CAPTCHA helps a little bit with this, right? But you probably do want some kind of rate limiting where people can't just, or bots or whatever malicious actors can't just submit thousands and thousands of contact form entries. CSRF, cross-site request forgery, this has been around for a long time. I think, somewhere around 20 years. Still not completely a solved problem. If you use a provider, it should be solved. But if you want to write this on your own, you're going to have to solve this by yourself. An example I give here is the synchronizer token pattern. Where when somebody visits your page, they get a cookie with a session ID in it, and you generate a CSRF token that gets put in some kind of storage on the server side. And then when the form is submitted, the server side code is going to extract the session ID from the cookies, get the CSRF token from the key value store, and then verify that the tokens match. And so that's going to help you with CSRF, but you got to do this work, right? Input validation. If you've been working with computer security at all, basically any sort of user input needs to be sanitized, right? Like you cannot just take raw user input and jam it into your database. You have to sanitize it. You have to strip blank lines. You have to remove the potential for cross-site scripting. So you do have to do that work. If you're building your own form, you need to make sure that you have some sort of email regex maybe, or a phone regex, and that you're stripping out the information that people are putting in, right? To make sure that there's nothing malicious inside of what they're submitting. It's just the plain text of whatever their message is. And that gets into cross-site scripting, right? So if you're building a JavaScript submission form, you're going to want to take into account the ability to strip things like script tags, right? And there's lots of libraries that can help you do that. You're just going to want to make sure that you bring those in, use them, test it a little bit. Again, this can be a little bit challenging, right? Like, how do you know that your code is perfectly stripping all the things that it needs to do, right? Like, you don't necessarily know. You might have to do some testing, play around with it a bit. There's a bit of risk there, right? So at the end of the day, creating an HTML form is pretty easy, but putting it on the internet and accepting submissions where anybody, any bot, any spammer can submit it is fraught with a bit of peril. So you want to maybe think twice about how you do this, or really make sure that you're taking as much as possible into consideration when you're building this out. At the end here, I give you kind of an example of a free tier do-it-yourself stack, right? Of course, again, we're not reinventing the entire universe. You could potentially do all this work in your own virtual machine, but that's a whole other post, right? Like, that's a whole other set of issues that you're going to have and work that you're going to have to do if you're just going to like build this all in your own virtual machine. The stack that I'm giving here as an example, just a simple example, is, you know, using Cloudflare for hosting the static pages, for getting the SSL set up, for doing the CAPTCHA, for storing the information from the form in a database, for using a key value store for the CSRF tokens, for running server-side code, the submission handler, and for doing rate limiting. So Cloudflare takes care of a lot of that. You could use a combination of other services to do the same thing. And then resend.com for the email sending, so storing the form information in a database, and then also sending an alert that you've got something in a contact form. So this is a lot, right? Like, just to build your own form, it's a bit ridiculous, I think, in some ways, right? But it's just the reality still, unless you want to use an existing service provider that can just give you the forms and just pay, you know, the $10, the $25 a month, whatever it is, right? So thanks for listening. Just went over this blog post. Let me know if I missed anything, and have a great week.